Jasmine Davis, 28, bone tired and frozen to her core, stared at the email address she typed with shaking hands. Hanwha-Holdings KR. The subject line mocked her. Community Land Rights Inquiry. "This is insane," she whispered, her breath fogging in the unheated office of the Westside Community Center. The space heater rattled uselessly in the corner. Outside, someone had strung up pathetic Christmas lights on the chain-link fence, half of them already dead. It was only December 2nd. Her phone buzzed. Marcus calling. She let it ring. Her little brother didn't need to know she was about to beg a faceless corporate contact for help. Someone connected to a Korean development firm that had the power to save or destroy their block. What Marcus definitely didn't need to know was what she'd actually written. Jasmine's eyes dropped to the draft email still open on her screen. Not the professional one she'd meant to send, but the raw, desperate list she'd typed at 2 a.m. in a moment of complete breakdown. My Christmas wishes. 1. My brother stays alive. 2. The gangs leave us alone. 3. We keep this building. 7. Hope. Just hope. Her finger hovered over the mouse. She'd written that list as therapy, never intending to send it. The real email, formal, distant professional, was supposed to go to some mid-level assistant, someone who might pass her plea up the chain. But in her exhaustion, in her desperation, she'd attached the wrong draft, and she'd sent it to the primary address. The one marked urgent/direct in her notes. The one that, according to her research, went straight to Kim Jae-woon. Not an assistant, not a department head. The man himself. The CO. The myth. The ghost who owned half of downtown but never appeared in photographs, whose name made her contact's voice drop to a whisper. Jasmine's stomach dropped as her sent folder refreshed. Delivered, 9:47 p.m. Read receipt. Yes. Oh, God, she breathed. Oh, God, what did I just do? Outside, a police siren wailed. The Christmas lights flickered. And somewhere across the city, in a world she couldn't imagine, a very dangerous man was reading her soul. Hold up, subscribe first. Then comment your location. Now brace yourself. This story is about to explode. Jasmine Davis had stopped believing in Christmas miracles around the same time the first eviction notice appeared taped to the community center's door. That was 3 months ago. Now it was December 2nd, and someone, probably Mrs. Chun from the senior yoga class, had strung up lights along the chain-link fence outside. Half of them were already dead, blinking weakly against the gray Charleston winter, like a heart monitor losing signal. Inside, the space heater coughed and rattled, doing absolutely nothing against the cold that seeped through the cracked windows. Jasmine pulled her coat tighter and stared at her laptop screen, at the 2 email drafts that would decide everything. Draft 1 was professional, careful. She'd spent hours crafting it, researching the right tone to use when begging a corporate giant for mercy. It was addressed to a mid-level assistant at Hanwha-Holdings, someone who might pass her plea up the chain about the community center's land rights. Draft 2 was the truth. She'd written it at 2 in the morning after Marcus called from a friend's house, his voice shaking because he'd seen the gang tags appearing on their block again. After Mrs. Chin asked if the center would still be open for Christmas dinner. After Jasmine realized she was so tired she couldn't remember the last time she'd slept through the night. My Christmas wishes. The subject line read, because apparently her exhausted brain had a sense of humor. 1. My brother stays alive. 2. The gangs leave us alone. 3. We keep this building. 4. Someone sees us. 7. Hope. Just hope. She'd skipped numbers. She'd rambled. She'd written like someone who'd finally broken. It was never meant to be sent. Jasmine rubbed her eyes and clicked on draft 1, the safe one, the professional one. She copied the assistant's email address from her Jill at Hanwha-Holdings.kr, pasted it into the to field. Her phone buzzed. Marcus calling. Again, she let it ring, guilt twisting in her stomach. He didn't need to know how bad things were, how the developers were circling, how she'd started having dreams about showing up to the center and finding it bulldozed. Everyone she promised to protect scattered to the wind. The phone stopped buzzing. Jasmine looked back at her screen, at the email ready to send, and clicked attach. Her hand was shaking from cold or fear or exhaustion, probably all 3. She hit send. The relief lasted exactly 3 seconds, right up until her sent folder refreshed and she saw the subject line that appeared. My Christmas wishes, no. The word came out strangled. No, no, no. She clicked on the sent email with hands that had gone numb. Wrong draft. Wrong attachment. And there, in the field, not the assistant's address, but the one marked urgent/direct in her research notes. The one her contact had mentioned in a whisper, warning her to never, ever use it unless she wanted the man himself to see. J. Kim at Hanwha Dash Holdings K are Kim Jae-woon. Not an assistant. Not a department head. The ghost who owned half the city. The name that made grown men nervous. Delivered, 9:47 p.m. Read receipt. Yes. Outside, a siren wailed. The Christmas lights flickered and died completely. And somewhere across the city, a very dangerous man was reading her soul. Kim Jae-woon's penthouse existed in permanent twilight, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of Charleston's glittering skyline, but the lights inside kept deliberately low. The technology was cutting edge. Screens embedded in the walls, security feeds cycling silently, encrypted phones lined up on the glass desk like soldiers. Everything controlled, everything monitored, everything exactly as he demanded. He'd been reviewing acquisition reports when the email arrived, flagged by his system, because someone had actually used his direct address. Most people weren't stupid enough to do that. The subject line made him pause. My Christmas wishes. Spam. Had to be. Some kind of phishing attempt, though how they'd gotten this address was a problem he'd need to solve with violence. He opened it anyway. The first line made his jaw tighten. My brother stays alive. Not, I want or I wish for. Just a flat statement of desperate need. The second was worse. The gangs leave us alone. Number 3, we keep this building, asterisk. Jae-woon leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking in the silent room. This wasn't a scam. This was someone who cracked under pressure and sent their breaking point directly to, he checked the metadata, a community center in Westside, the neighborhood his company was acquiring, the one with the inconvenient holdout property his legal team kept complaining about. His finger hovered over delete. Then he saw number 7. Hope. Just hope. The words hit him like a punch he hadn't seen coming. Not money. Not things. Not even the specific solutions to her problems. Just hope. The belief that someone might care. That the universe might bend, just once, in her favor. Jae-woon hadn't thought about hope in a long time. Hope was what he'd buried the night he'd made his first kill. The night he'd chosen survival over everything else. Hope was a luxury for people who didn't understand how the world actually worked. But he remembered it. That feeling. Back when he believed someone might save him. No one had. He pressed the intercom. June. My office. Now. His head of security appeared within 60 seconds. Silent as smoke. Find out everything about Jasmine Davis. Jae-woon forwarded the email. Employment. Family. Financials. Enemies. Everything. I want it in 2 hours. June's expression didn't change, but Jae-woon knew him well enough to catch the slight hesitation. The community center director? Is this about the acquisition? It's about making sure she's real. June nodded and disappeared. Jae-woon stared at the email for another moment, then began typing. His response was brief, direct, and would terrify her. Good. Fear kept people honest. Ms. Davis, you have my attention. That is dangerous. Tomorrow, 10 p.m. The address below. Come alone. Delete this email. Delete yours. Tell no one. If you don't show, I'll assume you're smarter than you appear. Kay added the address of a closed restaurant in the historic district, one of his properties, empty this time of night, with no cameras and no witnesses. Then he hit send and poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey, staring out at the city he controlled. Someone had asked him for a hope. He'd forgotten what to do with that. The restaurant had been beautiful once. Jasmine could tell from the silk wallpaper and the hand-carved wooden screens that divided the empty dining room into shadows. Now it felt like a mausoleum, dark, cold, and utterly silent except for her footsteps on the polished floor. She'd almost not come. Had stared at the email for 3 hours, her finger hovering over her phone to call the police, call Marcus, call anyone. But the message had been clear. Tell no one, or whatever small chance she would vanish. So here she was, alone, walking toward the single table in the back where a man sat waiting. Kim Jae-woon looked exactly like someone who could destroy her life without breaking a sweat. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe late 30s, with sharp features and eyes that tracked her approach with predatory focus. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than her yearly salary, and he didn't stand when she reached the table. Sit, not a request. Jasmine sat, gripping her bag to keep her hands from shaking. He studied her for a long moment. You look different than your picture. What picture? The one from your website. You smile in that one. He tilted his head slightly. Do you still believe in the work you do? Saving people who won't save themselves. The question caught her off guard. Yes. Why? Because someone has to. That's not an answer. That's a slogan. He leaned forward, and Jasmine caught the scent of expensive cologne and something else. Danger, maybe, or just the proximity of someone who'd learned to weaponize silence. I asked why you believe. Why you haven't given up when everything around you is falling apart, when you're clearly exhausted, when you're so desperate you'd email a stranger and beg for hope. Jasmine's jaw tightened. Is that why you brought me here? To make me feel stupid? I brought you here to understand what kind of person sends an email like that. His voice dropped lower. To understand if you know what you're asking for. Because hope isn't free, Ms. Davis. And I don't deal in charity. Then what you deal in? Control. Power. The kind of solutions your world pretends don't exist. He sat back. Tell me, if I could make your problems disappear, what would you be willing to become? I don't understand. If I removed the gangs from your neighborhood, if I secured your building, if I made sure your brother walked home safely every night, his eyes never left hers, what part of yourself would you compromise? How much darkness can you stomach if it protects the light you're fighting for? Jasmine's heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a test. And she realized with sudden, crystalline clarity that she had two choices. Lie and lose whatever chance this was, or tell the truth and accept whatever came next. My brother is 17, she said, voice steady despite the fear. He's smart, kind. He wants to be a teacher, and he's going to die if something doesn't change. She met Jae-woon's gaze directly. So you want to know what I'm willing to become? Whatever I have to. Because losing myself is survivable. Losing him isn't. Something flickered in Jae-woon's expression. Almost like recognition. Good, he said quietly. That's the first honest thing anyone said to me in years. June delivered the report at midnight. A thin folder that contained everything about Jasmine Davis that mattered. Jae-woon read it twice, looking for the angles, the hidden agendas, the proof that she was someone's plant or a more sophisticated trap than he'd anticipated. There was nothing. She was exactly what she appeared to be, exhausted, broke, and telling the truth. The community center ran on fumes and her own salary, which she'd cut twice to keep the lights on. Her brother Marcus had a 3.8 GPA and worked weekends at a grocery store. Their mother had died of cancer 4 years ago, leaving behind medical debt Jasmine was still paying off. No criminal record. No suspicious associations. Just a woman trying to hold together a neighborhood that the world had decided to forget. Jae-woon closed the folder and looked at June, the West Side crew, the ones moving into her territory. June's expression remained neutral. What about them? Make them disappear. Permanently. I want it clean. No bodies, no evidence, no connection to us. Make it look like they took an offer from another city and relocated. Tonight. And if they resist, then make sure no one finds them to ask questions. June nodded once and left. Jae-woon pulled up the legal files on the West Side property acquisition. The community center sat on land his company wanted, but there were zoning complications, tenant rights issues, a tangle of bureaucratic obstacles his lawyers had been slowly dismantling. He made 3 calls, each to people who owed him favors they couldn't refuse. By 2 a.m, the legal barriers were gone. Paperwork filed, officials convinced, objections mysteriously withdrawn. The community center's land rights were secured, indefinitely. He leaned back in his chair and poured another whiskey, wondering why he felt less satisfied than he should. 3 days later, Jasmine stood in her office staring at the letter from the city with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The legal challenges had vanished. All of them. The zoning approval, the tenant protections, even the mysterious lien that had appeared last month. Gone. According to the letter, there had been administrative errors. Oversights. Everything was resolved in the center's favor. It was impossible. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Hey, the guys who were hanging around the store last week haven't been back. Everyone's saying they left town, or something. Weird, right? Jasmine's stomach dropped. She thought about the empty restaurant, about Jae-woon's questions, about the way he looked at her when she'd said she'd become whatever she had to be. She walked to the window and stared out at the neighborhood. The Christmas lights were still up, burning brighter now somehow, like the street itself had exhaled in relief. Someone had helped her. Someone dangerous. Someone who made gang members disappear and legal problems evaporate like they'd never existed. She should feel grateful, relieved, victorious. Instead, she felt the weight of debt she didn't know how to repay, settling onto her shoulders like snow that wouldn't melt. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. You're welcome. Delete this. She did, but the dread remained. The address came 3 weeks later, just as Jasmine had started to convince herself she'd never hear from him again. No message, just coordinates and a time, 9 p.m. She knew she shouldn't go. Knew that whatever debt she owed was growing with every second she spent in Kim Jae-woon's orbit. But she also knew she'd be there, because the alternative was pretending none of this had happened, and she'd never been good at lying to herself. The location was 40 minutes outside Charleston, down a dirt road that didn't appear on any map. She almost turned back twice. Then she saw the orange glow through the trees and followed it to a clearing where a controlled fire burned in a steel pit, sparks rising into the December sky. Jae-woon stood with his back to her, hands in the pockets of a dark coat, watching the flames. He didn't turn when her car door closed, but his voice carried across the distance. You came. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you were smarter than this. He finally looked at her, and in the firelight his features seemed less severe, almost human. Sitting alone in the dark with someone like me. Someone like you saved my brother's life. Jasmine walked closer, drawn by the warmth. Saved everything I've worked for. So yeah, when you ask me to meet you in the middle of nowhere, I show up. That's how gratitude works. Gratitude. He said the word like it tasted unfamiliar. Is that what you think this is? I don't know what this is. She stopped on the opposite side of the fire, letting the heat wash over her frozen hands. That's why I'm here. To understand what you want from me. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the crackling wood. When Jae-woon finally spoke, his voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. Your email, the way you numbered your wishes. You skipped 4, 5, 6, just jumped to 7. I was tired. I wasn't thinking. No, you were thinking too clearly. You knew what mattered and what didn't. He moved around the fire, closing the distance between them. I've spent 15 years building walls. Control. Distance. Making sure nothing unexpected could touch me. And then you sent me 7 words that broke through all of it. Hope, Jasmine said softly. You asked a stranger for hope. Not money, not power. Just a belief that someone might see you. He stopped close enough that she could see the reflection of flames in his eyes. No one's asked me for that. Ever. Maybe because you're terrifying. Maybe because everyone else wants something I can give. You wanted something I'd forgotten existed. His jaw tightened. It made me remember things I'd buried. And I'm not sure if I should thank you or hate you for it. Jasmine's breath caught. I know about loneliness. About building walls. So high you forget what it feels like when someone actually sees you. She held his gaze. Your power, your control, it should terrify me. And it does. But it also feels like the first safe thing I've had in years. The fire popped, sending embers spiraling into the darkness. That's dangerous, Jae-woon said. I know. Neither of them moved away. The fire had burned down to embers by the time Jasmine found the courage to say what had been clawing at her throat for weeks. I know what you are. Jae-woon's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between them. And what am I? Not a real estate developer. Not just a businessman. She wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. The way people talk about you, the ones who know your name. The way problems don't just get solved, they disappear. The way Marcus's threats vanished overnight like they never existed. She met his eyes. You're not someone who bends the rules. You're someone who breaks them so completely there's nothing left to find. Does that scare you? It should. Jasmine moved closer to the dying fire, closer to him. It does. But you know what scares me more? That for first time in 4 years, I don't wake up at 3 in the morning wondering if today's the day I lose everything. That Marcus texts me about his college applications, instead of which route is safe to walk home. That I actually believe the center might still be there next Christmas. Her voice cracked. You gave me hope. Real hope. The kind I'd stopped believing existed. That's wish number 7. Jae Woon said quietly. I know. She turned to face him fully. So yes, I know what you are, and I should run. But I can't, because whatever darkness you live in, you use to protect the only light I have left. The silence that followed felt different than before, heavier, more fragile. When Jae Woon finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made Jasmine's chest tighten. I had a sister, younger. She believed in people the way you do. Thought if you just worked hard enough, cared enough, the world would care back. He stared into the embers. She was wrong. The people we trusted, the ones who promised to protect us, they sold us out the moment it benefited them. She died because I wasn't strong enough to stop it, because I still believed in hope. Jasmine's breath caught. I built everything after that on one principle. Control what you can, destroy what threatens you, trust nothing but power. His hands clenched at his sides. For 15 years, that worked. I made myself into something that couldn't be hurt, because I'd already lost everything that mattered. And then you sent me an email asking for hope, like it was still possible. Like someone might actually give it to you. Jiwoon, you remind me of her. That courage wrapped in vulnerability. That insane belief that fighting for something makes it worth saving. He finally looked at her, and Jasmine saw something raw in his expression. It terrifies me, because the last time I cared about someone like that, I failed, and she paid the price. Jasmine closed the distance between them, her hand finding his. I'm not asking you to save me. I'm asking you to let me see you. The real you, not just the control and the power. His fingers tightened around hers. You might not like what you find. Try me? The embers glowed between them. And for the first time since his sister died, Jae Woon let someone past his walls. Jae Woon had never been inside an apartment like Jasmine's. Not because it was small, he'd grown up in worse, but because it was so thoroughly lived in. Books stacked on every surface, a blanket draped over a second-hand couch, photographs covering one entire wall, like a shrine to everyone she'd ever loved. The radiator clanked. The refrigerator hummed off-key. It smelled like vanilla candles and the Thai takeout containers on the counter. It was the opposite of his penthouse in every way that mattered. This is where you live, he said, not quite a question. This is where I live. Jasmine closed the door behind him, suddenly self-conscious about the cramped space, the peeling paint, the window that didn't quite close all the way. It's not much, but it's honest. He turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Everything here is real. No performance. No walls. I don't have the energy for walls anymore. I know. He crossed the small space between them in 2 steps. That's why I'm here. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was the kind of kiss that came from weeks of tension and denial, from 2 people who'd spent too long alone finally admitting they didn't want to be. Jasmine's back at the wall. Literally. There wasn't much room, and Jae Woon's hands tangled in her hair like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jasmine started laughing. What? Jae Woon's voice was rough. She gestured at the tiny apartment. There's nowhere to go. We're basically standing in my entire living space. A smile tugged at his mouth, the first real one she'd seen. This is a problem. A serious logistical issue. He pulled out his phone, and for a moment Jasmine thought he might call for a car, whisk her away to somewhere more appropriate. Instead, music filled the small space. Something soft and unexpected, a K-pop ballad that sounded like it came from another decade. What are you doing? Something I haven't done in 15 years. He held out his hand. Dance with me? Here? There's barely room to breathe. Then we'll make room. Jasmine let him pull her close, swaying in the cramped space between her couch and coffee table. It was ridiculous. his expensive suit pressed against her worn sweater, their feet bumping into furniture, the music slightly too loud for the small speakers. She stepped on his foot twice, and it was perfect. She started laughing again, and this time Ji-woon joined her, a sound that seemed to surprise him as much as it did her. They spun awkwardly, knocking into the bookshelf, nearly taking out a lamp. The song shifted to something with a faster beat, and Jasmine let herself move without thinking, without the weight of everything pressing down on her shoulders. Jae-woon watched her with something like wonder. When was the last time you did this? Before my mom died. We used to dance in the kitchen. She reached for his hand again. When was the last time you did this? I don't remember. He pulled her close, and this time the kiss was softer, sweeter. But I think I'm starting to. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, for the first time in years, they both chose light. The warning came from June at 3 in the morning, the kind of call that meant someone was already dead or about to be. They know about the girl. Jae-woon was out of bed before June finished the sentence. Ooh, Park's people. They've been watching her for 2 weeks. They have photos, her schedule, everything. June's voice was tight. There's a meeting called for tomorrow. The council wants to discuss your judgment. The council, the old guard who'd built the organization on principles of absolute detachment, who saw emotional connections as fatal weaknesses to be excised like tumors. Jae-woon had sat in those meetings himself, had voted to eliminate men who'd made the same mistake he was making now. How long do I have? Hours. Maybe less. Park's moving tonight. He won't wait for approval. If he removes her first, the council will call it preemptive protection of the organization. Jae-woon was already moving, pulling on clothes, checking the gun safe. Where is she? Home. Alone. Marcus is at a friend's house. Get everyone you trust. Meet me there in 10 minutes. He made it in 8, driving through red lights and empty streets with his heart in his throat. The building looked quiet. Too quiet. No lights in her window. No movement on the street. June materialized from the shadows. 2 cars. Park's men. They went in 5 minutes ago. Jae-woon didn't wait for the rest. He took the stairs 3 at a time, gun already drawn, every instinct screaming that he was too late, that this was exactly what happened when you let someone matter. Jasmine's door was ajar. He kicked it open to find her pressed against the far wall, a man with a knife standing between her and the exit. Another man lay on the floor, blood pooling from his head, where Jasmine had apparently hit him with a lamp. The man with the knife turned. Kim Jae-woon. Park said you'd come. Said you'd gotten soft. Put the knife down. Park's orders are clear. The girl dies. You learn your lesson. Everything goes back to normal. The knife pressed closer to Jasmine's throat. Unless you want to break every rule we have for some woman you've known 2 months. Jae-woon's voice dropped to something cold and final. Last chance. The man smiled. You won't risk her. One wrong move and the shot was clean. The man dropped before he could finish the threat. June appeared in the doorway with 3 others, weapons drawn. Park. Find him. End this. Jae-woon crossed to Jasmine, whose eyes were wide with shock. Are you hurt? She shook her head, but her hands were shaking. They said you had to choose. Your empire or me. I know. Jae-woon, you can't. I already did. He pulled her close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. Let them come. Let the council vote. Let Park make his move. He tilted her chin up, making her meet his eyes. I spent 15 years building walls. I'm done living in them. Outside, engines roared as June's team moved out. Inside, Jae-woon held the woman who'd made him remember what hope felt like and prepared for war. The cannery had been abandoned for a decade, all rusted metal and broken windows overlooking Blackwater. Jae-woon arrived with 12 men, armed and silent, moving through the darkness like they were part of it. Park Min-suk had expected him to come alone. That was his first mistake. His second was thinking Jae-woon still cared about the rules. The fight was brutal and efficient. Jae-woon had spent 15 years building control, learning patience, operating within the careful boundaries of their world's unspoken codes. He shattered every single one of them in 8 minutes. Park's men went down hard, and Park himself didn't get the dramatic confrontation he'd orchestrated. Just June's knife in the dark and a body that would wash up 3 days later with no witnesses and no questions. Jasmine was zip-tied to a chair in the back office, a bruise blooming on her cheek, but her eyes fierce. She didn't cry when she saw him. She just said, "Marcus?" "Safe. June's people are with him. Your organization, I'll handle it." He cut through the zip ties, his hands checking her for injuries with gentleness that contradicted the blood on his suit. "Can you walk?" "Yes." "But Juwoon, they said your own people. I know what they said." He pulled her to her feet, his grip steady. "I made my choice." The council meeting happened 2 days later. Jae-woon walked in without June, without backup, and faced 7 men who'd helped him build his empire. "You violated the code," the eldest said. "Emotional compromise. You've made us all vulnerable." "The code," Jae-woon replied quietly, "was written by men who'd forgotten what they were protecting. You want me gone? Take your shot. But know this, I'm not the man I was a year ago. I'm more dangerous now. Because I finally have something worth burning the world down for." 3 of them walked out. The others stayed, recalculating their loyalty in real time. Jae-woon rebuilt his organization with new rules. Power still mattered, control still mattered, but isolation was no longer mandatory. The structure shifted, adapted, became something both stronger and more flexible than before. Christmas Eve arrived wrapped in cold and promise. Jasmine stood in the empty building on King Street. 3 stories, newly renovated. The property transferred into the community center's name through a maze of legal entities that would take years to untangle. "This is too much," she said, but her eyes were bright. "It's wish number 6. Jae-woon came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Someone who sees your mission, who protects it. You remember the number I skipped." "I remember all of them." Through the windows, they could see the neighborhood. Marcus walking home with friends. Mrs. Chin arranging chairs for tomorrow's Christmas dinner. Lights strung up everywhere like hope made visible. "I'm still dangerous." Jae-woon said against her hair. "Still the man who makes problems disappear. That doesn't change." "I know." Jasmine turned in his arms. "But now you're dangerous for something that matters." Outside, snow began to fall, rare for Charleston, covering the streets in white. Inside, 2 people who'd stopped believing in miracles held each other in the dark, having found something neither had been looking for: a love built on truth, protected by power, and sustained by the simple, radical choice to see each other completely. The empire stood, the center thrived, and somewhere between darkness and light,